Mysteries await just a page away. Ready to dive in? Welcome to The Book Reader, where stories unfold one enchanting page at a time. Subscribe now and...
Ice Station Zebra. Alistair MacLean.
Chapter 2.
When I awoke, I was still heavy with sleep, the heaviness of a man who has slept for a long time. My watch said 9:30, and I knew it must be the next morning, not the same evening. I had been asleep for 15 hours. The cabin was quite dark. I rose, fumbled for the light switch, found it, and looked around. Neither Hansen nor the engineer officer was there. They must have come in after I had gone to sleep and left before I woke up. I looked around some more and then I listened. I was suddenly conscious of the almost complete quiet, the stillness, the entire lack of any perceptible motion. I might have been in the bedroom of my own house. What had gone wrong? What hold-up had occurred? Why in God's name weren't we underway? I'd have sworn the previous night that Commander Swanson had been just as conscious of the urgency as I had been. I had a quick wash in the folding Pullman-type basin, passed up the need for a shave, pulled on shirt, trousers and shoes and went outside. A few feet away a door opened to starboard off the passage. I went along and walked in. The officers' wardroom, without a doubt, with one of them still at breakfast, slowly munching his way through a huge plate full of steak, eggs and French fries, glancing at a magazine in a leisurely fashion and giving every impression of a man enjoying life to the luxurious full. He was about my own age, big, inclined to fat, a common condition, I was to find among the entire crew, who ate so well and exercised so little, with close-cropped black hair already graying at the temples and a cheerful, intelligent face. He caught sight of me, rose and stretched out a hand. "Dr. Carpenter, it must be. Welcome to the wardroom. I'm Benson. Take a seat, take a seat." I said something appropriate but quick, then asked, "What's wrong? What's been the hold-up? Why aren't we underway?" "That's the trouble with the world today," Benson said mournfully. "Rush, rush, rush. And where does all the hurry get them? I'll tell you." "Excuse me. I must see the captain." I turned to leave, but he laid a hand on my arm. "Relax, Dr. Carpenter. We are at sea. Take a seat." "At sea? On the level? I don't feel a thing." "You never do when you're 300 feet down. Maybe 400. I don't," he said expansively, "concern myself with those trifles. I leave them to the mechanics." "Mechanics?" "The captain, the engineer officer, people like that." He waved a hand in a generously vague gesture to indicate the largeness of the concept he understood by the term mechanics. "Hungry? We've cleared the Clyde?" "Unless the Clyde extends to well beyond the north of Scotland, the answer to that is, yes, we have." "Come again." He grinned. "At the last check we were well into the Norwegian Sea, about the latitude of Bergen." "This is still only Tuesday morning?" I don't know if I looked stupid. I certainly felt it. "It's still only Tuesday morning," he laughed. "And if you can work out from that what kind of speed we've been making in the last 15 hours, we'd all be obliged if you'd keep it to yourself." He leaned back in his seat and lifted his voice. "Henry." A steward, white-jacketed, appeared from what I took to be the pantry. He was a tall, thin character with a dark complexion and the long, lugubrious face of a dyspeptic spaniel. He looked at Benson and said in a meaningful voice, "Another plate of French fries, Doc?" "You know very well that I never have more than one helping of that carbohydrate rubbish," Benson said with dignity. "Not at least for breakfast. Henry, this is Dr. Carpenter." "Howdy," Henry said agreeably. "Breakfast, Henry," Benson said. "And remember, Dr. Carpenter is a Britisher. We don't want him leaving with a low opinion of the chow served in the U.S. Navy." "If anyone aboard this ship has a low opinion of the food," Henry said darkly, "they hide it pretty well. Breakfast. The works. Right away." Not the works, for heaven's sake, I said. There are some things we decadent Britishers can't face up to first thing in the morning. One of them is French fries. He nodded approvingly and left. I said, Dr. Benson, I gather. Resident medical officer aboard the Dolphin, no less, he admitted. The one who's had his professional competence called into question by having a competing practitioner called in. I'm along for the ride. I assure you I'm not competing with anyone. I know you're not, he said quickly. Too quickly. Quickly enough so that I could see Swanson's hand in this, could see him telling his officers to lay off quizzing Carpenter too much. I wondered again what Swanson was going to say when and if we ever arrived at the drift station and he found out just how fluent a liar I was. Benson went on, smiling. There's no call for even one medico aboard this boat, much less two. You're not overworked? From the leisurely way he was going about his breakfast, it seemed unlikely. Overworked. Rye sick bay call once a day and no one ever turns up except the morning after we arrive in port with a long cruise behind us, and then there are liable to be a few sore heads around. My main job, and what is supposed to be my specialty, is checking on radiation and atmospheric pollution of one kind or another. In the old submarine days, the atmosphere used to get pretty foul after only a few hours submerged, but we have to stay down for months if necessary. He grinned. Neither job is very exacting. We issue each member of the crew with a dosimeter and periodically check a film badge for radiation dosage, which is invariably less than you'd get sitting on the beach on a moderately warm day. The atmospheric problem is even easier. Carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide are the only things we have to worry about. We have a scrubbing machine that absorbs the breathed-out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and pumps it out into the sea. Carbon monoxide, which we could more or less eliminate if we forbade cigarette smoking, only we don't want a mutiny on our hands when we're 300 feet down as burned to monoxide by a special heater and then scrubbed as usual. And even that hardly worries me. I've a very competent engine man who keeps those machines in tip-top condition. He sighed. I've a surgery here that will delight your heart, Dr. Carpenter. Operating table, dentist chair, the works, and the biggest crisis I've had yet is a cigarette burn between the fingers sustained by a cook who fell asleep during one of my lectures. Lectures? I've got to do something if I'm not to go off my rocker. I spend a couple of hours a day keeping up with all the latest medical literature, but what good is that if you don't get a chance to practice it? So I lecture. I read up on places we're going to visit and everyone listens to those talks. I give lectures on general health and hygiene and some of them listen to those. I give lectures on the perils of overeating and underexercise and no one listens to those. I don't listen to them myself. It was during one of those that the cook got burned. That's why our friend Henry, the steward, adopts his superior and critical attitude toward the eating habits of those who should obviously be watching their eating habits. He eats as much as any two men aboard, but owing to some metabolic defect he remains as thin as a rail. Claims it's all due to dieting. It all sounds a bit less rigorous than the life of the average GP. It is. He brightened. But I've got one job, a hobby to met the average GP can't have. The ice machine. I've made myself an expert on that. What does Henry think about it? What? Henry. He laughed. Not that kind of ice machine. I'll show you later. Henry brought food and I'd have liked the maître d'hôtel of some, allegedly, 5-star hotels in London to be there to see what a breakfast should be like. When I'd finished and told Benson that I didn't see that his lectures on the dangers of overweight were going to get him very far, he said, Commander Swanson said you might like to look over the ship. I'm at your complete disposal. Very kind of you both. But first I'd like to shave, dress and have a word with the captain. Shave if you like. No one insists on it. As for dress, shirt and pants are the uniform of the day here. And the captain told me to tell you that he'd let you know immediately if anything that could possibly be of any interest to you came through. So I shaved and then had Benson take me on a conducted tour of this city under the sea. The Dolphin, I had to admit, made any British submarine I'd ever seen look like a relic from the Ice Age. To begin with, the sheer size of the vessel was staggering. So big had the hull to be to accommodate the huge nuclear reactor that it had internal accommodation equivalent to that of a 3,000-ton surface ship, with 3 decks instead of the usual one and lower hold found in the conventional submarine. The size, combined with the clever use of pastel paints for all the accommodation spaces, working spaces and passageways, gave an overwhelming impression of lightness, airiness, and above all, spaciousness. He took me first, inevitably, to his sick bay. It was at once the smallest and most comprehensively equipped surgery I'd ever seen. Whether a man wanted a major operation or just a tooth filled, he could have himself accommodated there. Neither clinical nor utilitarian, however, was the motif Benson had adopted for the decoration of the one bulkhead in his surgery, completely free from surgical or medical equipment of any kind. A series of film stills in color featuring every cartoon character I'd ever seen, from Popeye to Pinocchio, with, as a 2-foot square centerpiece, an immaculately cravat Yogi Bear industriously sawing off from the top of a wooden sign post the first word of a legend that read, "Don't feed the bears." From deck to deckhead, the bulkhead was covered with them. "Makes a change from the usual pin-ups," I observed. "I got inundated with those too," Benson said regretfully. "Film librarian, you know. Can't use them, supposed to be bad for discipline. However, lightens the morgue-like atmosphere, doesn't it? Cheers up the sick and the suffering, I like to think, and distracts their attention while I turn to page 217 in the old textbook to find out what's the matter with them." From the surgery we passed through the wardroom and officers' quarters and dropped down a deck to the crew's living quarters. Benson took me through the gleaming tiled washrooms, the immaculate bunk room, then into the crew's mess hall. "The heart of the ship," he announced. "Not the nuclear reactor as the uninformed maintain, but here. Just look at it. Hiffle, jukebox, record player, coffee machine, ice cream machine, movie theater, library, and the home of all the card sharps on the ship. What chance has a nuclear reactor against this layout? The old-time submariners would turn in their graves if they could see this. Compared to the prehistoric conditions they lived in, we must seem completely spoiled and ruined. Maybe we are, then again maybe we're not. The old boys never had to stay submerged for months at a time. This is also where I send them to sleep with my lectures on the evils of overreading." He raised his voice for the benefit of 7 or 8 men who were sitting around the tables drinking coffee, smoking and reading. "You can observe for yourself, Dr. Carpenter, the effects of my lectures on dieting and keeping fit. Did you ever see a bunch of more out-of-condition fat-bellied slobs in your life?" The men grinned cheerfully. They were obviously well used to this sort of thing. Benson was exaggerating and they knew it. Each of them looked as if he knew what to do with a knife and fork when he got them in his hands, but that was about as far as it went. All had a curious similarity, big men and small men, the same characteristic I'd seen in Zabrinsky and Rawlingson air of relaxed competence, a cheerful imperturbability that marked them out as being the men apart they undoubtedly were. Benson conscientiously introduced me to everyone, telling me exactly what their function aboard ship was and in turn informing them that I was a Royal Navy doctor along for an acclimatization trip. Swanson would have told him to say this. It was near enough the truth and would stop speculation on the reason for my presence there. Benson turned into a small compartment leading off the mess hall. "The air purification room. This is Engine Man Harrison. How's our box of tricks, Harrison?" "Just fine, Doc, just fine. CO reading steady on 30 parts a million." He entered some figures in a logbook. Benson signed it with a flourish, exchanged a few more remarks and left. Half my day's toil done with one stroke of the pen, he observed. I take it you're not interested in inspecting sacks of wheat, sides of beef, bags of potatoes, and about 100 different varieties of canned goods. Not particularly. Why? The entire forward half of the deck beneath our feet, a storage hold, realize given up mainly to that. Seems an awful lot, I know, but then 100 men can get through an awful lot of food in 3 months, which is the minimum time we must be prepared to stay at sea if the need arises. We'll pass up the inspection of the stores. The sight of all that food just makes me feel I'm fighting a losing battle all the time, and have a look at where the food's cooked. He led the way forward into the galley, a small square room all tiles and glittering stainless steel. A tall, burly whitecoat cook turned at our entrance and grinned at Benson. "Come to sample today's lunch, Doc?" "I have not," Benson said coldly. "Dr. Carpenter, the chief cook, and my arch-enemy, Sam McGuire. What form does the excessive calories take that you are proposing to thrust down the throats of the crew today?" "No thrusting required," said McGuire happily. "Cream soup, sirloin of beef no less, roast potatoes, and as much apple pie as a man can cope with. All good, nourishing food." Benson shuddered. He was just about to leave the galley when he stopped and pointed at a heavy bronze 10-inch tube that stood about 4 feet above the deck of the galley. It had a heavy hinged lid and screwed clamps to keep the lid in position. "This might interest you, Dr. Carpenter. Guess what? A pressure cooker? Looks like it, doesn't it? This is our garbage disposal unit. In the old days when a submarine had to surface every few hours, garbage disposal was no problem. You just tipped the stuff over the side. But when you spend weeks on end cruising at 300 feet, you can't just walk up to the upper deck and tip the waste over the side. Garbage disposal becomes quite a problem. This tube goes right down to the bottom of the Dolphin. There's a heavy watertight door at the lower end corresponding to this one, with interlocking controls that make it impossible for both doors to be open at the same time. It would be curtains for the Dolphin if they were. Sam here, or one of his henchmen, sticks the garbage into nylon mesh or polythene bags, weighs them with bricks. Bricks, you said? Bricks. Sam, how many bricks aboard this ship? Just over 1,000 at the latest count document. Regular builder's yard, aren't we? Benson grinned. Those bricks are to make sure the garbage bags sink to the bottom of the sea and not float to the surface. Even in peacetime, we don't want to give our position away to anyone. In go 3 or 4 bags, the top door is clamped shut and the bags are pumped out under pressure. Then the outer door is closed again. Simple. Yes. For some reason or other, this odd contraption held a curious fascination for me. Days later I was to remember my inexplicable interest in it and wonder whether, after all, I wasn't becoming psychic with advancing years. "It's not worth all that attention," Benson said good-humoredly. "Just an up-to-date version of the old rubbish chute. Come on, a long way to go yet." He led the way from the galley to a heavy steel door set in a transverse bulkhead. 8 massive clamps to release and then replace after we had passed through the doorway. The forward torpedo storage room. Benson's voice was lowered, for at least half of the 16 or so bunks that lined the bulkheads or were jammed up close to the torpedoes and racks were occupied, and every man occupying them was sound asleep. Only 6 torpedoes, as you can see. Normally there's stowage for 12 plus another 6 constantly kept loaded in the torpedo tubes. But those 6 are all we have just now. We had a malfunction in 2 of our torpedoes. Newest and more or less untested radio-controlled type. During the NATO exercises just ended, and Admiral Garvey ordered them all to be removed for inspection when we got back to the Holy Lock. The Hunley, that's our depot ship, carries experts for working on those things. However, they were no sooner taken off yesterday morning than this drift station operation came our way, and Commander Swanson insisted on having at least 6 of them put back on right away. Benson grinned. If there's one thing a submarine skipper hates, it's putting to sea without his torpedoes. He feels he might just as well stay at home. Those torpedoes are still not operational? I don't know whether they are or not. Our sleeping warriors here will do their best to find out when they come to. Why aren't they working on them now? Because before our return to the Clyde, they were working on them for nearly 60 hours non-stop, trying to find out the cause of the malfunction and if it existed in the other torpedoes. I told the skipper that if he wanted to blow up the Dolphin, as good a way as any was to let those torpedo men keep on working. They were starting to stagger around like zombies, and a zombie is the last person you want to have working on the highly complicated innards of a torpedo. So he pulled them off. He walked the length of the gleaming torpedoes and halted before another steel door in a cross bulkhead. He opened this, and beyond, 4 feet away, was another such heavy door set in another such bulkhead. The sills were about 18 inches above deck level. You don't take many chances in building those boats, do you? I asked. It's like breaking into the Bank of England. Being a nuclear sub doesn't mean that we're not as vulnerable to underwater hazards as the older ships, Benson said. We are. Ships have been lost before because the collision bulkhead gave way. The hull of the Dolphin can withstand terrific pressures, but a relatively minor tap from a sharp-edged object can rip us wide open like an electric can opener. The biggest danger is surface collision, which nearly always happens at the bows. So, to make doubly sure in the event of a bows collision, we have those double collision bulkheads first. Submarine ever to have them. Makes fore and aft movement here a bit difficult, but you've no idea how much more soundly we all sleep at night. He closed the after door behind him and opened the forward one. We found ourselves in the forward torpedo room, a narrow, cramped compartment barely long enough to permit torpedoes to be loaded or withdrawn from their tubes. Those tubes, with their heavy hinged rear doors, were arranged close together in 2 vertical banks of 3. Overhead were the loading rails with heavy chain tackles attached. And that was all. No bunks in here, and I didn't wonder. I wouldn't have liked to be the one to sleep forward of those collision bulkheads. We began to work our way aft and had reached the mess hall when a sailor came up and said that the captain wanted to see me. I followed him up the wide central stairway into the control room, Dr. Benson a few paces behind to show that he wasn't being too inquisitive. Commander Swanson was waiting for me by the door of the radio room. Morning, Doctor. Sleep well. 15 hours. What do you think? And breakfasted even better. What's up, Commander? Something was up, that was for sure. For once, Commander Swanson wasn't smiling. Message coming through about drift station Zebra. Has to be decoded first, but that should take only minutes. Decoding or not, it seemed to me that Swanson already had a fair idea of the content of that message. When did we surface? I asked. A submarine loses radio contact as soon as it submerges. Not since we left the Clyde. We're close to 300 feet down right now. This is a radio message that's coming through? What else? Times have changed. We still have to surface to transmit, but we can receive down to our maximum depth. Somewhere in Connecticut is the world's largest radio transmitter, using an extremely low frequency, which can contact us at this depth far more easily than any other radio station can contact a surface ship. While we're waiting, come and meet the drivers. He introduced me to some of his control center crews with Benson. It seemed to be a matter of complete indifference to him whether it was officer or enlisted man, and finally stopped by an officer sitting just aft of the periscope stand. A youngster who looked as if he should still be in high school. Will Rayburn, Swanson said. Normally we pay no attention to him, but after we move under the ice he becomes the most important man on the ship. Our navigation officer. Are we lost, Will? We're just there, Captain. He pointed to a tiny pinpoint of light on the Norwegian sea chart spread out beneath the glass on the plotting table. Euro and Sins are checking to a hair. Sins? I said. You may well look surprised, Dr. Carpenter, Swanson said. Lieutenant Rayburn here is far too young to have any sins. He is referring to espionage, inertial navigational system, a device once used for guiding intercontinental missiles and now adapted for submarine use, specifically nuclear submarines. No point in my elaborating. Will's ready to talk your head off about it if he manages to corner you. He glanced at the chart position. Are we getting there quickly enough to suit you, Doctor? I still don't believe it, I said. We cleared the Holy Lock a little earlier than I expected, before 7, Swanson admitted. I had intended to carry out some slow time dives to adjust trim, but it wasn't necessary. Even the lack of 12 torpedoes up in the nose didn't make her as stern-heavy as I'd expected. She's so damned big that a few tons more or less are here or there doesn't seem to make any difference to her. So we just came barreling on up. He broke off to accept a signal sheet from a sailor, and read through it slowly, taking his time about it. Then Ho jerked his head, walked to a quiet corner of the control center, and faced me as I came up to him. He still wasn't smiling. I'm sorry, he said. Major Hallowell, the commandant of the drift station. You said last night he was a very close friend of yours. I felt my mouth begin to go dry. I nodded and took the message from him. Read. A further radio message, very broken and difficult to decipher, was received 0945 Greenwich Mean Time from Drift Ice Station Zebra by the British trawler Morning Star, the vessel that picked up the previous broadcast. Message stated that Major Hallowell, officer commanding, and 3 others unnamed, critically injured or dead. No indication who or how many of the 4 are dead. Others, number again unknown, suffering severely from burns and exposure. Some message about food and fuel, atmospheric conditions, and weakness in transmission made it quite indecipherable. Understood from very garbled signal that survivors in one hut unable to move because of weather. Words, ice storm, clearly picked up. Apparent details of wind speed and temperature, but unable to make out. Morning Star, several times attempted contact drift station Zebra immediately afterward. No acknowledgement. Morning Star, at request of British Admiralty, has abandoned fishing grounds and is moving closer into barrier to act as listening post. Message ends. I folded the paper and handed it back to Swanson. He said again, sorry about this, Carpenter. Critically injured or dead, I said. In a burnt-out station on the ice cap in winter, what's the difference? My voice fell upon my ears as the voice of another man, a voice flat and lifeless, a voice empty of all emotion. Johnny Hallowell and 3 of his men. Johnny Hallowell. Not the kind of man you would meet often, Commander. A remarkable man. Left school at 15 when his parents died, to devote himself to the support of a brother 8 years younger than himself. He saved, he scraped, he sacrificed, he devoted many of the best years of his life to doing everything for his younger brother, including putting him through a 6-year university course. Not till then did he think of himself, not till then did he get married. He leaves a lovely wife and 3 marvelous kids. 2 nieces and a nephew not yet 6 months old. 2 nieces, he broke off and stared at me. Good God, your brother? Your brother. He didn't for the moment seem to find anything peculiar in the difference of surname. I nodded silently. Young Lieutenant Rayburn approached us, an odd expression of anxiety on his face, but Swanson abruptly waved him away without even glancing in his direction. He shook his head slowly and was still shaking it when I said abruptly, "He's tough. He may be one of the survivors. He may live. We must get Drift Station Zebra's position. We must get it." "Maybe they haven't got it themselves," Swanson said. I could see that he was grateful for something to talk about. It is a drifting station, remember. The weather being what it is, It may have been days since they got their last fixes, and for all we know their sextants, chronometers and radio direction finders have been lost in the fire. They must know what their latest fix was even though it was a week ago. They must have a fairly accurate idea of the speed and direction of their drift. They'll be able to provide approximate data. The Morning Star must be told to keep transmitting non-stop with a continuous request for their position. If you surface now, can you contact the Morning Star? I doubt it. The trawler must be the best part of 1,000 miles north of us. His receiver wouldn't be big enough to pull us in, which is another way of saying that our transmitter is too small. The BBC have plenty of transmitters that are big enough. So have the Admiralty. Please ask one or the other to contact the Morning Star, and ask it to make a continuous send for Zebra's position. They could do that themselves direct. Sure they could. But they couldn't hear the reply. The Morning Star can if there's any reply. And she's getting closer to them all the time. We'll surface now, Swanson nodded. He turned away from the chart table we'd been standing beside and headed for the diving stand. As he passed the plotting table he said to the navigator, "What was it you wanted, Will?" Lieutenant Rayburn turned his back on me and lowered his voice, but my hearing has always been a little abnormal. He whispered, "Did you see his face, Captain? I thought he was going to haul off and sock you." "I thought the same thing myself," Swanson murmured. "For a moment. But I think I just happened to be in his line of vision, that's all." I went forward to my cabin and lay down in the cot.
And that marks the end of the current chapter. Thank you for listening to The Book Reader. Stay tuned for the next episode tomorrow. Please subscribe for updates.